I'm seeking to understand myself. And
Right.
they can do it in really healthy ways or unhealthy ways. But there is this really awesome opportunity to not just see that about yourself, but also see that about others.
Right.
Classic 2 saying that. Classic
Yeah.
2. Who
Yeah.
wants to understand?
I mean, I do think that's one of the beautiful things about the Enneagram, though, is it gives you this window. And I remember early on in learning the Enneagram having this sort of compassion as you learned the motivations for
Totally.
the other types and how those were, how those are created for people, right? And at some point we can talk more about the psychology of early childhood development and how personalities are formed. But
Mhm.
in this moment, it's just that recognition of like, oh man, we take these things on and we attach all these meanings to these things just in an effort to be loved and taken care of. And sometimes we do it in really flawed ways.
100%. 100%. I think it harkens back to a lot of my 2 things where I am anticipating others' needs and creating a story out of what those needs are when it could be completely inaccurate.
Right.
But I'm
Yeah.
curious for you. So you were involved in this since 2017. My introduction to this was beyond that. I think it was 2022. 2022. What sparked you about it in comparison to other, a disc as an example
Well,
that
sure.
stood out and you wanted to explore it differently?
Well, without going into like the whole sordid history, and I think this is a very five thing, but I was always looking for an answer. I would have considered myself a seeker, right? So I have taken all of them. If there is a personality assessment that can be taken, it is highly likely that I've taken it at some point. And I kept finding like little things where I'd be like, that makes sense to me, like in Myers Briggs, for example, or Strengths Finder, like, oh,
Sure,
okay.
sure.
But there was never anything where I really felt I got some sort of true insight of something that could help me in my development. And when I came across the Enneagram the first time, I just took a free one online, which I don't recommend, and we'll get into that at some point. But
Yeah,
I just took a free assessment, like a lot of people do, and that's their first exposure. And honestly,
yeah.
it didn't resonate. And so I had a similar feeling like, oh, this is just like everything else because that
Mhm.
free test didn't go deep enough. It didn't give the full window. When I found the IEQ 9, which I found through, I had had enough interest sparked just from the free test and a friend who had mentioned it to me to do more research as one does as an Enneagram 5. And I came across the IEQ 9 and took that. And then through that was, oh yes, this is it. This is exactly it. Uh,
Yeah.
but what stood out to me was this understanding of that motivation. I knew I had these behavior patterns,
Mhm.
but to your earlier point, it was like, well, yeah, I do these things, but I don't have a full understanding of why I was doing those things.
Right.
And that Enneagram work sort of peeled back another layer deeper to be like, oh,
Mhm.
okay. So,
Mhm.
and that's where and then there's the real work, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. I think you bring up a great point because I think there is real work and real value behind it, and it can be as deep as you make it, which
Right.
is really unique, I think, to any other one that I've taken in terms of DISC or any of those, where you can get a certain level of depth from some of those others, but very few times have I ever reached out to somebody who knows their Enneagram type from a paid result, right? Where they're completely misaligned.
Right.
And they're oftentimes so in it that, like, they're doing the work without even realizing that they're doing deep work,
Right.
and their daily interactions and the awareness that it brings. So, it it really has brought me the ability to see myself for where things come from and what they are, and appreciate or change what I can change. Also see the understanding in other people, where oftentimes in my 2-ness that would show up as, like, in my unhealthy 8 of judgment of, "No, I must
Sure.
control, I must,"
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
um and we'll get into all the types and everything, I know, but, um, it's been a really eye-opening journey for me, and I really encourage it for anybody who's interested in any sort of getting to know themselves on a deeper level, or, you know, I can also relate this back to, I had a lot of confusion about where that came from for me. Like, where those motivations came from, why I did what I did, and sure, I could relate it back to upbringing and things of that nature, but I couldn't really get a solid tie until I knew that's in fact my motivation,
Right.
and started doing more deep work, and where did that come from? To be more well-rounded, because that's the goal of the Enneagram, right? Is to be integrated into all 9 numbers.